Going for something a little different this build. Since the Angelus comes with a shield, I wanted to see if I can play into a more defensive kind of playstyle built around the weapon. The Ice Sphere, Braid of a Seductress, and using the Monk's Hood in combination with the Bulwark Incense are all built for survivability. And most of the rosaries are tailored for defense. That's why I went with the Resistance Speed, Divine Intervention, and Ailment Immunity. But even the best defenses will eventually get overwhelmed, so I relied on my secondary and the Dynamo Ring to help kill enemies faster. You can dash forward while aiming down sights, which will trigger the Dynamo Ring, allowing you to block a hit and mow down enemies with a souped up Angelus, if they haven't already fallen to the electric damage. As for the Angelus, what we're really looking at are the first and second Mysteriums. That shield is forward facing, but it seems to block damage from all directions, and the damage boost it gives after blocking a hit is fairly substantial. Though right now there seems to be some bugged interaction between the Angelus and the Monk's Hood, where your Monk's Hood shield count appears to get wiped when you pull up the shield of the Angelus. Then your shield count only shows when you aim down sights. It's weird, but the shields are still there. You just can't see them for some reason. They appear the next time you take damage. Unfortunately, the shield is the only place where this thing stands out. It's gonna struggle against bosses and mini-bosses, and I don't really feel like it was meant for that. That's why I leaned more into survivability with this build, to give it more of a niche. Mostly what we want out of the Angelus is that shield and the damage boost we get after absorbing a hit. You can kind of ignore that last Mysterium. I mean, it does have a really good effect, so if you're good at parrying, then it could work out for you. Going with the Whisper, this can be a form of crowd control for the build. The Shockwave is probably the best crowd control spell in the game, at least for a light spell. And how could I not include the Ice Sphere on a defensive base build? This will not only give you a little protective bubble to shield yourself in, with a massive H-pool of 500 HP, but it also serves as a means to freeze enemies. The Braid of a Seductress not only gives you a 30% melee damage reduction, but it will also freeze those melee attackers whenever they hit you. Now, you could use something like the Book of Serpents, and I thought about using something like that, but it doesn't give you the melee damage reduction. So I feel like the Braid works better for this defensive base build. So with the Braid and the Sphere and the Frostbite on this build, we have 3 means to freeze enemies. And it also feeds into the Water Arcanas, so we have a reason to use those. Now these work particularly well if you unlock something like Shattered Soul, which deals a percentage of an enemy's max HP every time they unfreeze, which can deal massive damage for bosses. The Monk's Hood fetish on this build, because it'll give you a shield every time you absorb a manifestation. And if you're pretty good at avoiding damage, you can have these shields up pretty much the entire map, especially since it gives you an extra chance to get a shield, and we have a 25% for that shield to hold whenever it takes a hit. Now we're combining that with the Bulwark Incense, which also gives you an extra chance for your shields to hold whenever you take hits. Now this works more effectively with something like the Incense Rosary Bead. So in that case, that's why we're seeing a 30% chance here instead of the normal 15% chance. And then we've got the Dynamo Ring. So we have another means to deal more damage. So with the Dynamo Ring dealing damage, you're getting more damage out of the Angelus after you block a hit with the shield, and dealing more damage to stunned enemies. That's how we can push the damage of this build and get more out of the Angelus. Now if the Frostbite isn't working out for you, we can always go with something like the Hangfire, which is another weapon I tested for this build, but we'll go over that later. The Hangfire isn't as effective from inside the bubble as the Frostbite, but to be honest, the range isn't that bad, especially since the splash damage it deals isn't reliant on range, and it's a way to ignite enemies. And for this build, it handles bosses better than the Frostbite, unless you manage to unlock Shattered Soul during the run, which is really what makes the Frostbite so good at killing bosses in the first place. I found the Frostbite to be more fun of a playstyle because it gives the build a long range option so I could engage enemies at a distance. And it operates better with our heavy spell, so we can pick off enemies from inside of it. It also gives another line of protection with that ice beam it leaves hanging in the air, so I could kind of lock down an area of the battlefield. But the Hangfire is better at handling hordes of monsters, and yeah, we get more damage out of the Angelus on ignited enemies from it, so I find myself swapping back and forth between the two. That's pretty much how the build works in a nutshell. The Angelus won't ever be as good as some of the other OP weapons in the game, which is why I decided to go with the defensive base build for it, to give it a little bit more of a niche.